lucky we found you. I was thinking I'm going to have to give your presentation for you. Terrific. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin Leavenworth. I'm a board member of GIC. Truly, it's been an extraordinary organization I've been part of for more than 12 years, and I think today has been very representative of the typical GIC conversation, which takes us well beyond the realm of economics, and takes us into really looking under the hood as to what really makes our world tick. I'm particularly excited, of course I've had a preview of all of our panels, and each one I think has touched on very, very relevant components of our changing world. And the fact is, and Michael was, as our closet economist historian, history is always changing. The world is always changing. There's probably never, it's just that, as in human nature, we sometimes don't want it to change, but we are clearly in a time when there's a tremendous inflection point. And we've been hearing that, and I think part of it is, it is human nature to say, well, I don't want things to change. I want life to be the way I predicted, and then I can comfortably, do my business and go home in the evening. But the reality is that, I think clearly we're seeing a tectonic shift in the world order. That is, and I think there's two ways to look at it. We either, run around and scream and, think this is terrible, or we look for the opportunity in it. And I think, and as we've heard the different panels, really what we're hearing, in my opinion, is eyes wide open. There's changes afoot. This is okay, and clearly, it is precisely this type of forum that helps us, get a better sense. And the thing is, we're also seeing it from different angles. And I think what's been kind of interesting is hearing the viewpoint from friends and neighbors from around the world. So let me just get into the panel. And again, what I think this panel really is a wonderful conclusion to the conversations, and that is because we end with both the Filippo's view as an established economist who has been focusing on productivity particularly, and you've been principally working in Europe, but now based here out of Singapore. So
lucky me.
Yes, very lucky you. And then we have Mario, who, I think adds the reality component to a lot of the theory that we've been hearing. And Mario, who's a journalist, diplomat, trade negotiator, and now banker, representing a Chilean.
No one's perfect.
We'll forgive you. Has a very, very interesting view, certainly as a Chilean in Asia, watching the trade ties literally come together. And then I think what is most shocking, and I'll just end with this thought, is that I would say with the exception of very select few people, particularly speaking from the U.S., we are really quite unaware of what's going on. And so I think here we're going to have both a view from Filippo in terms of, where is global productivity going or not going? And on the other hand, Mario, in our preparation, I am just absolutely blown away by the fact that the ties, these theoretical ideas that we're discussing, actually are a reality. And a little country like Chile is part of this untold story of pioneers. So that's just the context for this panel. And so Filippo, I'll turn it over to you, and then Mario, and then let's see where reality lies.
Chairman, if you don't mind, I stand.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Pleasure.
So, so that to make also, the final. No, this is not mine. We want to invert? No. No, we keep it.
We can do it, yes.
We can do it. Okay. So, apologies first because it's going to be, there are lots of charts. I'm not going to tell all the charts, but I was getting excited actually as I was doing it. So I put several points there. There are three sort of main issues that I'm going to touch upon. First, I'm going to show you a simulation that I did using a standard econometric model on sort of a Trump tax sort of shock. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm doing. Then I'm going to show you a bit the issue of so where the global trade and the global value chains is going. So just to tell you that in a way we got already on the summit of the expansion on trade and global value chain. But then I will conclude that this is not a reason for complacency, because if we get some protectionism going in, this is going to hamper us. So, and actually rather hard so. So keep with me a few minutes. I will keep in 15 minutes, but really running a bit fast. Okay. So first of all, okay, situation is a bit different than what we saw before. Economic growth is still relatively sort of not exciting. But what is really not exciting at all is the prospect of productivity. Productivity continues to really slide down, and the last figures are really almost in negative territory for certain countries. So we are in a period in which you don't want to have an extra shock on productivity growth. Okay. So that's a bit the background and the motivation. So we get then to the story that is a bit what Yumin Wang was telling before. Asia is very important, but still the United States, despite is actually shrinking in importance, is still 13% of world import. So I will show you that this relatively small sort of part of the world import will have lots of impacts, and particularly very much differentiated across the globe. So I will basically do a trade war proxying the policy that actually been proposed by Trump. And we'll enter actually in, I don't know if Mike is here, but I will be interested in knowing how we compare the trade policy like a tariff shock versus the one that actually a bit complicated things that are in mind of the advisors of Trump. So the main point, I made it already. So let me start with the simulation. So I use a standard model, is an iGEM model, is kind of, imagine a bit of a Keynesian model, demand-driven, okay? So demand goes down, so GDP, trade goes down. So that's a bit of the idea. And so really what is, there is a very rich sort of distribution of import and export. All the world is connected. It's a global economy model. So that's very important because it gives you the sense really of the differentiated impact of any shock. So what I'm going to model is basically a model, I model like a shock on the import prices. The calibration is like, Trump is talking about 35% on China. We are 10 already, so is about, considering the import share of China, about 5% of increase in the import prices of the US, correct? So that is basically the shock that I'm giving here. So there is a baseline of import prices, and I shock it here. So very transparent what I'm doing, all right? So I shock this, and I put it into the model, and let's see what economics will tell us about, the standard sort of reaction of an import price increase. So it would be clearly higher cost of imports, will be putting down the real imports. Then you're going to have also, sorry, that is, then you're going to have also that there is a high correlation, sorry guys, I indicated here like this. So there is a high correlation between import and export, and so therefore the exports will drop as well. Then there is higher inflation, higher interest rate, the dollar will appreciate. As we were discussing with Mike, this is critical in terms of checking the reaction of shocks. So higher import prices will cause import volume to go down, export to decline as well, and but possibly by less. So the trade balance possibly will be actually improving, but slightly, okay? But then will be compensated by the fact if the dollar appreciation is very high, forget about the improvement of the trade balance, correct? So in terms of shock impact, you will see that the shocks are relatively large. The UEC import in volume terms will be by 5% increase in import prices will be going down in volume by 2.5 percentage points. This is a very strong decrease in import volume, but also the export will be going down by half that amount, okay? Then we have that, so this is what happens, and then also the GDP will go down because you are restricting import and export, and the GDP will be going down in about 2 years by 1.2 percentage point in the second year. So it's a very strong impact on the GDP as well. But what is going to happen to the rest of the world? Well, the rest of the world is going to be hit as well because you're going to have more than half a point loss in global trade out of that. This is what the model tells us. So, therefore, in a nutshell, you're going to have world trade going down rather sharply, but GDP also going down for the world by about more than 0.1% of GDP. So, not immaterial. What is really incredible is that, this is due, of course, of what Wang was telling us, is that, economies like China, say, particularly the Far East bloc, so small open economies, will tend to have, which have a very large share of trade, of course, will be hitting hard. So they will be having actually 0.10 percentage point down. Remark the difference that there is between their reaction and the reaction of large open economies such as China. If you look at Singapore, actually, you will see that the shock on Singapore is going to be 0.5% loss versus China instead, almost untouched. So that's very, very important difference. So large impact on global trade and global growth, and very differentiated, particularly, for countries which are small and open economies, okay? So that's the first impact. Now, of course, if there is a retaliation, I will be mentioning retaliation. I'm going to, you trust that basically I did the right thing. What is going to happen is that, of course, as expected, the impact is going to be actually even worse, because what you have is that without retaliation, the world trade was going down 0.4. With the retaliation of China, it's going down. So if there is really a trade war proper, you're going to have major impact, across the world. So that's a bottom line. Now, let's go now 1 second. Again, here, I think I don't want to do too much of it, but the debate is terribly confusing, and Mike hopefully can help us out. What I understand it is this famous border tax is a combination, okay, this is the definition that I found in Fari and others. So this is Gopinath, so major, so this is Harvard University professors. So the definition that they give is a border adjustment tax would treat domestically purchased inputs and imported inputs differently and encourage exports. Corporations will no longer be able to deduct the cost of imported inputs from their taxable income, but at the same time, their export sales revenue would not be taxed. So in economics, actually, this kind of stuff is equivalent to an exchange rate depreciation, okay? Because basically you have higher cost on import and lower cost of export. So this is basically was something Keynes actually was doing in the 30s, okay? But now, the real issue is that Keynes was doing this in the context of a fixed exchange rate regime to maintain the Bretton Woods sort of pound dollar. But now we have a situation in which, in fact, the dollar, as Mike was telling us, is actually increasing. So the dollar impact of this would be an appreciation, sort of, particularly if the Fed will in fact not being, accommodating this policy, but will be held in the rates and going up. So if the interest rates are going up, as soon as you have this policy, you're going to have a very strong or very, very strong impact on the dollar. So basically, all the economic profession right now in this confusing debate is basically saying, on the two questions, is it going to have a positive impact on the trade deficit? All the profession says no, all agree. But now there is a bit of a difference between the reasons for that. So someone, Krugman, says because there is a subsidy component on the export, higher demand, but Feldstein actually says because the investment savings balance will not change, and therefore the trade balance must remain unchanged, and thus the dollar must appreciate. This is what Feldstein says. So basically, even taking a much theoretical proposition, you're going to have actually a nullification of this positive impact eventually on the trade. And then the second thing is the second question among economists, is this desirable? Well, here there are really mixed opinions. So there is, yes, Feldstein says something literally, I mean, it's unbelievable this. He says, yes, a strong dollar is good for America. I mean, Feldstein. In this case, will raise US fiscal revenue 1 trillion. That's the computation that he does in 10 years. This is Feldstein. Second opinion, Krugman, more honest, says no, sure. Also because of possible financial market volatility following a stronger dollar. And then no. Far and others, Gopinath, Harvard basically thinks no impact on trade balance whatsoever, some positive fiscal impact, but very negative impact on US net foreign assets because, of course, you have a very strong appreciation of the dollar. So basically the bottom line. So that's not really a good policy. Okay. Now, what I want to say, this, I got 3 minutes more?
No,
5.
So take your time.
I'll take 1 second. Just give me another 5 minutes. Okay. So what is the bottom line on this confusing debate, tariff versus border tax? I think is, if I may, humble opinion. Most of the discussion is concentrated mainly on whether it's good or not for the US, okay? And really forget the overall damage, which is likely to be rather similar to the one that I've just simulated with, a standard model. Maybe you have different numbers eventually, but the fact of the matter is going to be negative for the global world and global trade. Now, negative also impacts, and then I want to add to the discussion this, which is a bit related to Mr. Wang was saying before, is that the negative impact will come from further shrinking of world trade, and also, and I would like to know really what the opinion of the people working in the region, the disruption in global value chains. So how much this will be hampering the activities, in fact, of global value chains, which was a major engine of actually growth of world trade and GDP in the last few years. So what I'm going to do in the following slides is to give you a sense of what happened to the world trade and GVC participation in the global economy, and then take some conclusion. So, one thing I want to mention, trade and global GVC. The trade never recovered, you have seen this several times, never recovered really from the global slump. In fact, it has been leveling off, okay? So, this is, many economists have been thinking, why so? Well, the opinion that is now kind of coming up is the fact that there was actually, this is the elasticity of trade on GDP, that was basically, presumably, lots of trade going on in sort of early 90s. So in a sense, this is a normalization, what we are looking right now, seeing this slower sort of elasticity of trade versus GDP. So nothing really to worry about, but still is something that is happening. There are also structural factors that are basically not there anymore. In the 90s, it was the opening up of China, global player, the starting of the GVC activity. So there were lots of reasons why the global trade was going so strong. Now, let me do one thing, and you have to trust me on this. This is an index that we have been doing with some colleagues on sort of GVC participation. So basically say, how much the GVC involvement has been increasing, okay? And this is actually takes, someone was mentioning value added, again, Mr. Wang before. This is actually incorporates the fact that you are the gross trade is one thing, the value added trade is another thing. So even considering this, you're going to be able to evaluate how much the global value chains actually mattered for the world. And then you see that this actually was on the growing path until 2008. There was a big down during the crisis, and then eventually a bit like the trade. So even the activity of global value chains, it seems to be leveling off, okay? So in the sense, what I'm saying is that the Trump policies, in the sense, the context of the Trump policies right now would be in the context of, some form of slowing down of the process of major process of growth in trade and global value chain sort of integration. Still, having said that, really, there is no reason why we should bother further this kind of, or attempting to create even a stronger slowdown in global value chains activity and global trade. Why so? Because the global value chain, despite have been actually leveling off, the activities still are very important, particularly for emerging markets. Again, Mr. Wong, we have done some work on evaluating basically what makes the market shares in terms of price competitiveness, non-price competitiveness, and other factors. Some of these other factors are global value chain integration. And you can see this, again, trust this number, I can provide some reference on this. You see that this is basically, say, India. So this is the market shares in export of India going up rather sharply. And then the yellow part was actually the price competitiveness. So the value of the rupee was helping a lot this actually increase in share. But also was counting very much is the fact that this green histogram, which is the global value chain sort of participation, was helping a lot the increase in market share of India. And this is the same also for China. China actually, here you can see that in fact, despite of Trump, the price competitiveness was not really so important, in fact, and declining in importance, while instead also the global value chain integration was still a very important factor. So what is the bottom line here? True, trade and global value chain integration are leveling off, still are very important. Therefore, an extra shock that you want to put on this by policies which are very much US-oriented is actually not good for the global economy. Now, this is the conclusion. And particularly, one thing I want to mention to you is that, if you recall the chart that I gave you before, so the first one on productivity, one thing that, regardless of this shock sort of impacts, what is very important is that for sure, if there is a hampering of the global value chain activity, you're going to have in parallel also a hampering of the most natural and market-driven allocation, international allocation of resources across the world. Because basically what's happening was that we were using capital and labor not in any location, looking for the best location for the world. So if anything, I can see is that certainly the prospect of productivity in an environment in which you have market forces reallocation of resources being hampered is actually going to be somewhat obstaculated. So that is really something that we don't want. So in a sense, it's not really good news what's going on, and really hope that, again, something will trigger a different pattern, but this pattern is not good for growth, global trade, as well as for productivity. I'll thank you very much for your attention.
I'm all filled with it. Hello, good afternoon. First of all, my thanks to GIC for incorporating Chile's only bank present in Hong Kong, Banco Security, as well as the only Latin American bank which has a Chinese name in Hong Kong. My name is Mario Artaza, and I'm privileged to head Banco Security's only operation outside of Chile with a representative office, which is located in Hong Kong. When we had a meeting with Filippo and Benjamin a few weeks ago by phone, I was a little bit intrigued because I had a feeling that people's expectations with regards to how the economy and how the world scenario is at this present time was rather bleak and dark. And on my side, living and working in Asia, my feelings were quite different. As a matter of fact, even though I've heard these sentiments for a long time, months, this has not happened since the inauguration in Washington, D.C., but there was a sentiment coming about for a while to that point. We as bankers, or we as members of the financial institution side, we are basically paid to seek out opportunities and to find expectations, credible expectations, which will bring about returns to our investors and our shareholders. And as that, I'm someone who works for an institution which is pretty confident with regards to what is happening today in Asia and where we're headed as a partner of Asia. I'm particularly very honored to be in Singapore today because Chile was present for the first time in this city back in 1821. The first Chilean schooner to arrive trading with Singapore was only a few years after our independence from Spain in 1818. So in effect, Chile has been present in this part of the world, Chile, the farthest country you can travel to from this part of the world in the Americas. We've been here trading since the early onset of the 19th century. As a matter of fact, the first consular and commercial office of Chile in China was established in 1845. So when you start thinking about what Chile is doing here and where we're coming from, as I speak to you today, we have a track record. So much so that we are Latin America's most open economy, integrated through free trade agreements with over 24 economies, including China, Hong Kong, China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Brunei Darussalam, New Zealand, Australia, the EU, the US, Canada, Mexico, Peru, and I could go on. We're a pretty open economy, and we depend, our growth of our country depends largely on foreign trade. Close to 70% of our GDP is due to our interaction with world markets. So what's going on right now is of particular relevance and interest to Chile. We are here as a bank because we're following our clients. Close to 75% of our clients, of Banco Securities clients, do business in some way or another with Asia, and in particularly are present in China. And when you talk about Chile and China, we're not talking only about copper or molybdenum or nitrates. Today, Chile is feeding China. We're the number one source for China of table grapes, of cherries, over $250 million worth of cherries. We're number two in wine. We're even exporting cattle, live cattle from Chile, traveling over 40 days. So we're talking about 24,000 heads of cattle from Chile to China. Just as the same fact that you're having cattle also today traveling from Oceania, from Australia or from New Zealand. There are certain aspects that I want to, which I find to be relevant, and my talk will be centered about the China's going out initiatives and how they impact Latin America and specifically Chile. And there are two, I want to make a point on two relevant aspects. The first one is that the world keeps on moving, not because the U.S. today is immersed in this situation of uncertainty does the world not move forward. And certainly Latin America is moving forward, in particular Chile, and other TPP members who somehow or another have to move on after the decision by the Trump administration. Be it noted that TPP is not an idea from the United States. TPP stems from the P4 agreement, and the P4 agreement members were Chile, New Zealand, Brunei Darussalam, and Singapore. So TPP does stem from another agreement which was in operation way before the U.S. started to look at it as a Trans-Pacific Partnership. Chile will be, China, as a matter of fact, will be joining in mid-March a summit that has been convened and will be hosted by Chile on how to advance trade in the Asia-Pacific region, and this will be held on the 14th and 15th of March. That's one relevant information I want to share. And the other one, which is the presentation aspect, which is the most important part, is that Chile will be joining other Latin American economies in the Belt and Road Forum, which is going to be held in May. And basically, this is probably the most important foreign and trade relationship initiative to be organized by the Chinese government this year in Beijing. And we believe that this is a very important aspect that we don't really see today being transmitted in media in the U.S. And it is kind of something that we are a little bit surprised, because for emerging economies in the Americas, Belt and Road is an issue that we are looking into very, very avidly. Not only because of the size of the initiative, but also because it has geostrategic implications. We're not talking here only about doing business. We're talking about strategic decisions and the relevance, for example, of China in terms of the global architecture for security. We're talking about the financial architecture with the renminbi not only being part of the basket of the IMF, but because the renminbi is increasingly being used to settle payments on trade. As a matter of fact, Chile is the economy that was identified by the Chinese authorities to be the renminbi clearinghouse for Latin America. So I wanted to start out with that. Bear with me, I only have two hands. I'm Chilean. This is how we start out with what we're doing, which I think is of particular relevance to this meeting. There are certain topics or certain words or certain phrases which everyone here in this room should be aware of today. And these are the phrases or the words that will define the next couple of years, if not decades, of the world, at least as how we know it. The first one is, and they all stem from what is going on today in China. The first one is the China Dream, the new normal, the AIIB, which is the Asia Investment Infrastructure Bank, which is seen as a counterbalancing to the influence of Western countries in the World Bank. And we're seeing not only a few countries being part of the AIIB, we're seeing over 60 countries, including from Latin America. We're seeing the interests of and participation of Brazil, the interests of Colombia, of Peru, of Mexico, and of Chile for sure. Made in China 2025, which is also an important aspect of this equation, as well as the 5-year plans. So if you want to know what's going on in today's world and where Latin America is putting its eyes on, these phrases and these concepts are absolutely important and relevant. People sometimes ask me, why are you so much into China and what's going on? Well, 24% of Chile's trade is with China. Over 50% of our trade is with Asia. And we're seeing that through the free trade agreement signed between Chile and China back in 2005, our trade went up from around $4 billion to $36 billion in a space of 11 years. The number one country of origin of automobiles today in Chile is from China. We're talking of around 20 different brands. We have over 100 labels of Chilean wine being sold today in China. So there is a very important interaction between Chile and China, even though we're geographically so far apart. So there does seem to be an interest, and this is not only between Chile and China. China has over $23 billion worth of investments in the mining sector in Peru. China has become a leading creditor in the Americas, in Latin America, for example, to Brazil, and we can mention obviously other countries, in particular Venezuela, for which you will well know with regards to oil. With regards to Belt and Road, in 2016, around $500 billion worth of projects and deals and infrastructure were announced in the Belt and Road region. We're talking about over 60 countries with a regional average GDP growth rate of 4.6%. While 1/3 of this activity of deals in infrastructure was in China, the rest was spread across the Belt and Road region. And the value of invested projects across the region has been growing at a compound annual growth rate of 33% since 2013, when the Belt and Road Initiative started out. The growth is evident in all of the core infrastructure sectors, which have been studied by specialized institutions. China's Belt and Road Initiative is designed to promote economic cooperation and beyond the countries along the Silk Road economic belt and the 21st century maritime Silk Road. As you can see from here, basically what the Chinese are trying to accomplish is to integrate themselves with the most important markets in the world. And this includes Central Asia, Europe, Africa, Oceania, and the Americas. The Americas do not form part of the map itself, but the Americas have been trading with Asia and with China for well, as I said before, a long time. As a matter of fact, silver coins minted in Mexico, as well as in Chile, were considered legal tender in this part of the world in the late 1800s and early 1900s. As a matter of fact, between Mexico and China, through the Philippines, there is the silver route, which was a trading route, and Chinese were very important in bringing about development, is particularly in infrastructure in Peru and in Chile during the late 19th century. Here's a slide which basically tells the difference between the Belt and Road and other economic cooperation modes. We're talking about the Belt and Road and free trade zones. There's one thing that I have to underline with regards to what has been spoken, at least on my experience as a trade negotiator, with regards to free trade agreements and the imposition of tariffs. Trade agreements are legally binding documents. You cannot just relinquish a trade agreement just because you feel like it, because you woke up in the middle of the morning and you say you don't like the trade agreement. I mean, this is a treaty. And in order to relinquish a treaty, it's not just by informing it to the press. There is a process, and it's not an easy one to get out of a trade agreement. Chile and China today are involved in the process of upgrading the FTA, which was signed in 2005. If a country of a free trade agreement wants to let go or not be part of that trade agreement anymore, to relinquish that free trade agreement or that legally binding document does have implications, legal implications in international law, and there is what's called the World Trade Organization, where there are sanctions and there are procedures in place which have been adopted, which was mentioned before, to safeguard the rule of law in international relations. So it's not an easy, quick, done deal when you speak about going beyond a free trade agreement. And that's why the Belt and Road Initiative is so important. As I said before, It includes more than 60 economies in Asia, Europe, and Africa. And the initiative proposes increased cooperation on policy coordination, connectivity, trade investment, financial integration, and most importantly for China, cultural exchanges. That's very key for the Chinese. When we talk about Chinese, what they're doing, they're not only investing, but they're also teaching. The amount of Confucius centers around the world, we're talking about hundreds, which are basically taking the Chinese culture to the rest of the world. And we're talking about 6 fundamental international economic corridors, which include the New Eurasia Land Bridge, the China-Mongolia-Russia Bridge, the China-Central Asia-West Asia Bridge, the China-Indochina, the China-Pakistan, the China-Bangladesh, the China-India-Myanmar. And we're not talking only about trade here, we're talking about also issues of defense and strategic importance to the world. We're talking about China selling submarines and ships and planes to Pakistan, making planes in Pakistan with the Pakistanis and selling them to Myanmar, selling submarines to Thailand, selling ships to Indonesia. I mean, we're talking about China becoming today a global arms as well as defense manufacturing hub for a number of countries, overtaking Germany and France last year. We're talking about 63% of the world's population, over 35% of the world's merchandise trade, and 30% of the world's GDP. By 2050, the Belt and Road region aims to contribute 80% of global GDP growth and advance 3 billion people into the middle class. I'll say it again. By 2050, the Belt and Road region aims to contribute with China to 80% of the generation of global GDP growth and advance 3 billion people into the middle class. So when people start talking about the relevance of the U.S. and what's going on with the U.S. economy and the implications of the U.S., I look at this. And we're talking about Chile, which is a country that's located 36 hours away by plane from this part of the world, and we're active here right now. And what are we active in right now? Well, there are 5 key areas. The first is policy coordination, planning and supporting large-scale infrastructure development projects. And we're talking about design, we're talking about architects, we're talking about engineering firms. We're not talking about selling them the bridge, we're telling about companies, small, medium, and large, which have experience already in manufacturing and establishing these type of connectivity links in the Belt and Road area. It's very important to mention, we're talking about data centers and the data transmission. There has not been, today there's no submarine cable between Asia and Latin America. And we're talking about creating a digital belt road, a digital road between China and Chile in order to bring updated transmission of information through this first ever submarine cable. And we have Chinese companies already looking at that. We're talking also about, for example, a railroad that will connect between Brazil, the Atlantic, to the Pacific through Peru, also with China participating. And China is also participating in connectivity projects between Chile and Argentina, tunnels which are located over 3,000 meters high. We're talking about, and that is facilities connectivity, building facilities to enable connectivity along the Belt and Road. Trade and investment, which means facilitating cross-border investments and supply chain cooperation. Financial integration, enhancing monetary policy, coordination, bilateral and financial cooperation, and the cultural exchange, which I basically told you, people-to-people bonds and cooperation. University exchanges. We're talking, I have figures here, but the increase of Chinese nationals studying abroad today, not only in the U.S., but also in Chile, in Mexico, in Spain, in Italy, it's grown 600%. Opportunities. Investment in the Belt and Road projects need A, stable and an open operating environment that ensures a sound and transparent legal and financial structure and the free flow of capital, information, and goods to carry out complex business transactions. International experience. and connections to navigate the diverse political, economic, and social landscape of the 60-plus Belt and Road countries. There, for example, my colleague from Mexico was talking about having a local characteristic and knowledge of the market, and that's where we are looking to fit in. Also, due diligence and risk management to evaluate the varied development and regulatory environments of the different Belt and Road economies, and effectively manage the investment, operational, and market risks of the projects. The analysis of the quality of the projects in order to tap into the enormous developmental potential of the Belt and Road economies, there is a need to minimize risk and ensure project sustainability. And the projects from the Belt and Road need capital and information to raise funds for capital-intensive long-term projects in infrastructure, energy and power. For example, when we talk about energy and power, Chile is one of the powerhouses today with regards to renewable energies, be it solar or be it wind. We're talking about long-term infrastructure projects, transport and logistics, information technology and industrial development, expertise to evaluate and operate large cross-border projects, risk management. I could go on and on, but I have a very few minutes. Here we're talking about some of the projects that are going on. Just last year, China committed to over $30 billion of infrastructure development in Pakistan. Here's what we're basically looking at what China is doing to do it in manufacturing. People sometimes forget that along with the U.S. and the Europeans, China today has a naval base in Djibouti. So in the Horn of Africa, we're seeing China expand its interests in order to protect its trade flows. And when we're talking about Belt and Road, there are implications with regards to how China is looking into to foster interaction with countries in Central Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe, in Central Asia, Africa, Iran, Afghanistan, the establishment of free trade zones. People, I don't know if you may be aware, but we're talking about the establishment of free trade zones within the China's territory, which will have special characteristics in order to link those regions with areas in the world. For example, you'll have one city which will be working with Europe, one city which will be working with the Americas, one city which will be working with Africa, and have expertise in sharing technology as well as trade. And here's where we're talking about banking and finance. This is very important. Asia is estimated to need at least $8 trillion to cover its infrastructure expenditures. And we're talking today with regards to AIIB. The U.S. is not part of the AIIB. Britain is, and other countries in Europe are. Here is the ministerial meeting. The Silk Road Fund, which is over $30 billion. We're talking about a train, for example, here in the ASEAN region to connect this part of the world with China's markets. So when we analyze what's the environment today of the region vis-a-vis Latin America and vis-a-vis the world, my team and I are clearly optimists. We're not only involved today as a representative bank in terms of showing trade go forward, but we're looking also at moving investments, be it in infrastructure, be it in land, for wine, for agriculture, be it for tourism. 120 million Chinese traveled last year to different locations around the world. To Chile, less than 15,000. Last year, 1 million Chinese went to Australia. $1 billion was made from that tourism to Australia. So there is a wide range of opportunities today when we look at interacting with China and specifically being part of the Belt and Road initiatives and all the institutionality that goes along with it. And China has taken note of that, with Latin America in particular. We have in place already a mechanism where we interact with China through the regional organization called CELAC. There will be a China-Latin America summit in the next few months. So do be aware that the world does keep on revolving. While the media says A, the world is revolving this way as well. So I'm pleased to share more about what we're doing and the experience of Latin America, which are very bright when it comes to its interaction with Asia and specifically with China. Thank you.
My goodness, Mario. I think that high-speed internet cable has already been established. Well, just some comments, and again, I do think this panel is so appropriate to conclude our conference. But and so a general question is that globalization, which Filippo, I mean, clearly, we are interlinked. Clearly, if we do get into tariff wars, it's not good. But underlying is this questioning that we're getting in places like U.S. and Europe, et cetera, which is, this idea that globalization is bad. So the question I would just ask is clearly in globalization, there have been winners and losers. And I remember in Chile, we had industries that closed as a result of our free trade agreements. But and clearly there are winners. But in the question to both of you, just getting a first glimpse, is overall, is the world a better place because of globalization? Filippo, may I ask you?
Thank you very much. I'm so happy that you have been portraying, because I'm actually optimist as you. So I was really trying, simulation by simulation, but couldn't really get the good thing out of it. So I'm glad that there is actually a future as well. So on the issue of globalization, for sure. I mean, I think you saw it in the way I've been looking at the issues. Globalization was a good thing. I mean, one should be careful, of course. Trade is not, sort of a final objective per se. I mean, we say all the time that is a mean to achieve objectives, correct? But it was very useful. The trade was very useful in order to sort of transmit, to this more efficient allocation of resources across the globe, as well as, in a way, allowing, tremendous progresses like the one that actually Mario was portraying. So, so my short reply on that is that, of course, we are well off, all of us. I mean, so that's I think is, and we are not. When I was portraying this negative development, is because we have been gaining from that. So we have to show the alternative. I mean, there is not really an alternative scenario which is actually close the border, nationalize, etc. Because we saw that this is not. Again, what is important to note here is that just a comment on what Mario was portraying. Investment, of course, is important, and you have been showing a lot of investment going on. But let me take also a macro view on that. I mean, the situation is not really so good across the globe. So we had an issue. So in the sense that, I like to be optimist, but we have to also still to think about why, actually on the macro level, investment overall is not really conducive. So this is something that, again, is a matter of reflection. Someone says it's a question of measurement of even the productivity sort of figures. Some will actually question really the way we measure that, but still, there are lots of underlying factors which make so that not all the world is China. I mean, in the sense. So that's I think is a word of caution on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Filippo. Mario.
Thank you. With regards to your question, with regards to globalization being good, I am a child of globalization myself. My parents went to the U.S. back in the 60s. I grew up in the U.S. I served Chile 22 years as a diplomat. I've been living in Asia 17 years. I am a globalized professional. So I cannot not say that I do not stand for globalization. My daughter, who's 18, was born in Singapore, grew up in China, is going to finalize her school in Hong Kong, will be going to university in London. My daughter sees no colors. She sees no differences between people. When Chile and China undertook the free trade agreement in 2005, I was part of the negotiation team. The free trade agreement between Chile and China was ratified by a democratically elected Congress with 0 votes against. That is a message. With regards to how we are today, and I think that it is important to mention that as well, we are, of course, going through a very difficult period of our history as humans. It is a history of humanity which is involved right now. But this is not a question of economics. It's a question of governance. It's a question of leadership. It's a question about stepping forward and saying what is right. And the problem that we have today, in my personal opinion, is that the true leaders are not stepping up to the plate. And that we're letting sometimes those who do not have certain characteristics for leading to take a role in the decision-making process. Does the world have alternative routes to move forward? Yes. I'll give you an example. I arrived to Asia without even knowing where I was in 1997, late 1996. I arrived to Singapore. I did not know anything about Singapore because at that time there was not much internet going on. And the only access I had to internet was to see the Singapore Airline website. So I was about to get married. I called my wife and said, "Hey, we're going to Singapore. I've been sent to serve Chile in the embassy of Chile in Singapore." And she said, "Singapore?" And I said, "Yeah, it's an island. We're going to live by the beach." I arrived to Singapore, and of course, I did not end up in the beach. I ended up in Bukit Timah, and I could not believe the heat. I could not believe and you know what? I never moved from Asia. There is a movement, a credible movement of moving forward, and here on the governance part, which Europe obviously has its difficulties, and I'm not going to get involved in that. I'm from Chile. We're an investment grade country. We're a country that is pretty strong in terms of governance, transparency, accountability, sound, strong financial institutions. We have 3 overseers, not one only regulator in Chile, 3 regulators which operate. Here's a question of the rule of law. And if society is for the rule of law, globalization will bring about positive change. That's the key. There's no getting out of it. Look at Singapore's interaction today with the world, and how it's able to trade and participate and have a very relevant voice. You had 2 candidates. Singapore had 2 candidates, Tommy Koh and Kishore Mahbubani, to become Secretary General of the United Nations. A city-state of 5 million people had 2 candidates. It has a credible armed forces. It's a credible, strong economy. It has a word in the world stage. Why? Because it's governed responsibly. So sometimes maybe we should think about why some regions of the world aren't doing so well. Is it because basically they're not a big market, or is it because they're not doing the homework when it comes to governing?
Wow, Mario. I do want to open it up to the audience. Any questions regarding the two presentations? Any thoughts, particularly with certainly from those of you who are based in the region? Is this what you are seeing as well? Is this do you see this as a positive trend? Open question.
I think it's interesting you talked about governance, and I want to get back to that in emerging markets. But it's Chile is a model for Latin America, clearly. I mean, in terms of the best governance in Latin America. And I think we're in Singapore today. Singapore, in some ways, is the model for Asia. But the reality is large parts of the world are not able to keep pace. And the benefits of globalization haven't been equally distributed as a result of that, in part. So how to mitigate that challenge in terms of integration plus then dealing with different standards and levels of governance?
We were talking with Diego during the luncheon with regards to Latin America, and I have to thank Michael and the team of GIC for the invitation to having us here and to close the sessions with Filippo and Benjamin, because it's been an outstanding opportunity to interact and to discuss issues. As I said it before, more on a personal level, this part of the conversation based on experience. I asked a question when we started out with regards to the management of expectations. And one of the problems that at least my experience shows me is that the level of expectation in many Latin American countries, because it's a region where is higher than what governments or can deliver by themselves. People today feel that they have a right to have a house, a right to have a car, a right to have free education, a right to have free health care, a right, and nothing's for free. Someone's got to pay for it. And governments don't have resources which are never ending. So from my personal standpoint, the management of expectations is key for governing with responsibility. You have to tell it as it is, without any flower and without any other way than what the moment of governing demands. One of the things that attracts me very much to China in terms of as an observer, and I keep always say, I have lived in Asia for 2 decades, and the more I live in Asia, the less I know about Asia. The more I read about China, the less I know about China. But what I have been able to gather is you have obviously a group of middle-class citizens who are learning to reach out to the world, who've already traveled to Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, now they're going to France. They're investing in dozens of chateaus in France, in property in Australia, in property in England, because that's where their children are going to study, because I want them to learn English and I want them to have further expectations. But bottom line is people in this part of the world tend to work hard. You obviously have situations of corruption, but people in general have a responsibility to work hard, to respect elders, to know where their place in society and what they need to do in order to move forward as a community. One of the great things about Singapore is that it moves forward as a community. One of the things that I see today in the world, I'm not going to mention any countries, communities are separated. There's bands. He's right, she's wrong. He's white, he's red. He's blue, under the same flag. So when you have these populist movements in the world today flowering up, I think that the way to counter it is to come back to the basics. And what are the basics? Responsibility, education, skills. Not everyone can be an astronaut. Not everyone can be. You have to. So. I'm still an optimist. I'm still an optimist with regards to what can be achieved. I'm still an optimist with regards to Latin America and China. I tend to believe that what's going on in the U.S., because the U.S. is a great nation, is something that will be overcome. I'm not someone who believes that the U.S. will come into a free fall. I'm not someone who believes that because sanity prevails. My father always taught me. My father is a very bright diplomat, like my Bolivian friend, and all diplomats are very smart. And my father used to tell me, Mario, if you watch a coffee, the froth is always on the top. You can move the coffee however you want it, but the froth will always come to the top. And that is my sentiment with regards to world trade and world politics. The froth will end up on the top.
It's a very positive note. One more question? Well, then let me, well, first of all, thank our panelists, because I think one of the things that is what we do at GIC is we try to have conversations that take us from both the very theoretical realm, which is an important, as we know, is an important tool, but as President Mester said, these are often blunt instruments. You know, Mario, your insight, and we've heard this throughout the conversation, is that, you know, behind the tools, the policies are people. And in the end, I think, you know, sometimes, especially those of us in the financial world, we tend to make this either a very academic or removed exercise. But in the end, it is people making decisions, and often quite imperfectly. You know, clearly, you know, we are witnessing a major, you know, historic change.
Yes.
The question, and I think, Mario, that, you know, your comments, it really is, you know, what do we do about that? And the first is, you know, number one, pay attention. And two is let us not abandon the fact that countries that trade with each other, work with each other, ultimately help each other become better. Now, I do think there is an underlying issue, and President Mester, we were talking about that you know, certainly we're not going to resolve today, but is that, you know, when we talk about the distribution of resources, and this is, you know, in the United States, I mean, the manufacturing jobs that have left, you know, are not going to be replaced. And therefore, not just on an individual societal level, there is probably a bigger question on a global level, which is not just the distribution of wealth in a more efficient manner, but also, you know, a better distribution of education, and which is your point, Filippo, about productivity. So anyway, I will end our panel there. I thank you both for the terrific insight, and thank you to our audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our conference for the day. I would like to again thank our sponsors, Strategas and Nikko Asset Management, for helping us put this together. Our thanks to President Mester for traveling all the way from Cleveland to get here, to all of our other speakers, and to you, the audience, and particularly thank you for the students for Amity for coming and sharing this conference with us. So I understand there are drinks downstairs someplace, and so, no, I tell everyone, you know, this is the conference. This is nice. But the real GIC is the social networking that goes on at dinner the night before, at the breaks, at lunch, downstairs afterwards. That's where you get the real good stuff. So let's go do the real good stuff now. Thank you very much for all coming.